How's it going, everybody? Lake Ranger here. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the four Gospels. Talk about each of their perspectives and relationships with Jesus. Talking about in which order they were written. Talk about what their original audience was intended for, uh, and what the perfect audience is for now. Um, if you guys are Yeah, before we get started, if you guys are new around here or if you've been here before, please consider hitting the subscribe button. And if you do subscribe and you want to support me even further, please share this video with as many people as possible, whether it be friends, family, or anyone who probably needs it. I'll also like to recommend you guys check out my video on the Old Testament versus New Testament. It'll give some more context on this video and the importance of the four Gospels. But in short, the four Gospels are the four eyewitness accounts of Jesus Christ. Each of them have their own perspectives and own relationships with Jesus. Now, the first Gospel that was probably written was most likely Mark. Mark being the shortest Gospel, and also Mark being much younger than the other apostles, kind of makes sense for him to be the first. Um, it also it also been it's also been kind of confirmed that Mark added on a few verses after Jesus has risen. Uh, Mark just added a few more verses to his gospel, and it kind of gives leverage that he finished first. But then it was probably Matthew. Then, but it's unclear who wrote theirs first, Matthew or Luke. But I'm gonna go with my gut and say that it was Matthew. Uh, then it was Luke, and then finally it was John. I'm gonna talk about Mark's gospel first. Mark's gospel was most likely written for the Romans, and the reason why I say that is because the Romans would not have cared much for his sermons or any of the prophecies of the Old Testament uh, or any of the prophets, except for maybe John the Baptist. But John the Baptist is the one who basically said that Jesus was here. So I don't think he counts. But Mark's gospel was would have been for the Romans because they would not have cared about any of that. But what they would have cared for was the power of Jesus and what he did. Um, Mark's gospel showed that Jesus had authority over many things, like the authority uh, to uh, to cast out demons, the authority to perform miracles, the authorities to teach in synagogues, the authority, uh, basically, point, just how powerful and how powerful Jesus was. And that's something that they would have cared about. And it makes sense wanting to preach to the Romans because the Romans were the most powerful, were by far the most powerful empire of the time. Spreading the gospel to them would have been a very smart move. But Mark's relationship with Jesus was probably he was just an eyewitness. I believe that when he met Jesus, he was a little child, a young kid, because I think he started writing his gospel when he was 15, 14 or 15, a young teenager. But Yeah, he was probably one of the children that he held in his arms or blessed. Uh, and Mark would probably go on to be one of the eyewitnesses of Jesus' resurrection. Um, but Mark was also Jewish, uh, because I think the person that Jesus is holding these children as they're in a synagogue and stuff like that, so it makes sense. Um, Now, Mark did not have a very personal relationship with Jesus, but he would grow up believing in Jesus and believing that he was the Son of God. And so much so that he would eventually become Peter's assistant and would follow Peter everywhere he went. And that's probably where he wrote the Gospels. Um, just like Peter, he would be killed for his devotion of um, spreading the gospel and spreading the the fact that Jesus has risen from the dead and and was the Son of God. Um, Mark's God. No, the perfect audience for the Gospel of Mark now would probably be for children, because Mark's Gospel is very short and very easy to read, and also it focuses on Jesus' miracles and what he did. And and kids with short attention spans, it'll be very easy for them to read the Gospel of Mark, or if they have dyslexic, read it, listen to it. Uh, because it makes Jesus seem like a superhero, uh, and kids tend to like superheroes. Uh, but based on a true story. Um, then we have the Gospel of Matthew. The Gospel of Matthew was, of course, written by Matthew. Matthew, before he became a follower of Christ, he grew up Jewish, but ended up going down a bad road and became a tax collector. He was completely shunned by the Jewish people, and Jesus had compassion on Matthew, and forgave him for his sins and told him to drop what he was doing and follow him. And I think that's what Matthew wanted to hear, was somebody forgiving him, somebody giving him another chance. The Jewish people had completely bailed on him and uh, and or abandoned him, and came in at the right time, and before his road went downwards even further. Like, there's no telling how much worse he would have became if Jesus didn't come at the time he did. But because Jesus had compassion on him and forgave him for his wrongdoings, he became one of the 12 apostles. Would also go on, in just like the other 12 apostles, would be able to perform miracles like healing the sick and casting out demons. Eventually, Jesus would ascend into heaven, and after the ascend to heaven, they would all group together and for the event called the Pentecost, where Matthew, along the other apostles, would all speak in tongues. They would be filled with the Holy Spirit and be able to speak in every language of the time. That's why people refer to this day as the Pentecost, because these guys were so filled with passion for the gospel that they spoke in every language at the time, that being Aramaic, Greek, Latin, Hebrew, what have you. Um, uh, Matthew would also go on just like the others, to spread the gospel until he was brutally killed for his faith. Um, and for his devotion that Jesus did rise from the dead. And Matthew's audience was most likely for the Jewish people. It makes it's kind of poetic. It would be kind of poetic to mention that the same people that he that shunned him for his crimes and gave up on him are his audiences are the same people that did that shunned him. And because Matthew, just like Jesus, was calling them out for their lack of faith and for being corrupted, and wanting to save his people is very fitting. And I really appreciate Matthew for doing that, making Matthew probably one of the best characters in the Bible. But Matthew's audience is definitely for the Jews, trying to rescue his own people. And the audience now would probably be like high school students and college students, because his gospel is focuses more on Jesus' sermons and Jesus' philosophies and poetry and it's just a higher level reading that children may not completely that children won't understand. And and I think it's very fitting. Now, the Gospel of Luke. His gospel is okay. The Gospel of Luke is special because he's the only follower of Christ at the time who've never met him once. Doesn't really have a personal relationship with Jesus either. He's just Luke was a journalist, a physician, and was a historian. He heard about Jesus from where he was. It's not known exactly where he is. Most people say, from what I hear, that he was Greek. That he was Greek. I heard some people just say that he was a Gentile from foreign lands. But he was not Jewish. But ended up meeting up with his disciples. Now, just his disciples would meet his mother and also his brothers, and probably his enemies and other eyewitnesses, and would create an orderly account based on that. I mean, his gospel starts off with the idea that he was an eyewitness. He says so right from the gate. He tells you, yeah, I'm not an eyewitness. My job here is to create an orderly account based on people around him and the evidence that he found. And it's kind of fitting that his gospel complements both Matthew and Luke such a degree that it's almost like he combined their two gospels together. What they're saying is most definitely true. Luke would also go on, after he writes his gospel, he would write the book of Acts to give the apostles what they did after Jesus ascended to heaven. Give them again talking about the day of Pentecost, talking about how much miracles Peter, James, and John, and the other apostles did, and would also introduce Paul as another disciple, um, and would eventually become Paul's assistant. Uh, and while he doesn't have a personal relationship, the evidence that he found was so supportive that he was willing to die for what he discovered and believed, that Jesus was the Messiah and was the Son of God, and really did rise from the dead, like everybody around him says. And his gospel was most likely written for the Gentiles like him, because he really focuses mainly on how he treated the outcast, how he treated Gentiles like him. Um, talks about how he met Matthew, and would also eventually talk about the Paul's redemption as well when he writes the Book of Acts, and just like the other apostles, Luke would end up being executed for his faith, but yeah, his audience would originally be for the Gentiles, to prove to them that this man throughout all was the Son of God, is the Son of God. And the perfect audience for now would most likely be for grown-ups, because his gospel is very mature, and a lot of historians use the Gospel of Luke to, just like Luke was an historian, would research the Bible, and a lot of people use the Book of Luke and also the Book of John, but they will use the Book of John, the Book of Luke, as evidence that Jesus was real, really lived, really died, and really rose from the dead. And then we have the Gospel of John. Now, before I get started, there's some people out there that's saying the Gospel of John and the John that writes Revelations are not the same John, even though John was the only apostle and only follower of Christ in the first century who survived his execution. Because he survived his execution, they exiled him on Patmos. And who is John of Revelation say he is? John of Patmos. I don't believe in coincidences, so they're the same. I'm sorry, it's the same guy. Also, if you listen to Revelations, or if you read Revelations yourselves and you read the Gospel of John, they're written very similar. Now, the Gospel of John is much different than the other Gospels, because 95% of the Gospel of John is not found in the others, but it still complements the other Gospels, because not only does, like I said, it has 5% of it, but it's just enough to complement theirs. But I think John starts his Gospel on a boldness. He starts his Gospel out of right out of the gate, telling you that Jesus is the Word of God, and he has been there from the beginning. telling you that this man is the Messiah. This man is the Son of God, and his gospel is just telling you, just him proving that point. The other gospels, they kind of keep you guessing. Skeptics, they were skeptics of Jesus. Like each time Jesus did something, they're like, who is this guy, and how is he able to do this? Like like when he stopped the storm with a wave of his hand, they were baffled at what he can do, and like they would constantly backtrack, and Jesus would call them out for it. But it seems that was John was different. I mean, John John was called the beloved apostle. John was was along with Peter and James his first apostles. They're like he was there to witness his first miracle, water and the wine, and he will be there to witness his last words being on the cross, which would be, "It is finished." That being that our debt, our pay, our redemption is now finished. Jesus has, but Jesus had saved all of humanity on that cross at that time, fulfilling his mission. And John is by far, out of all the 12 apostles, his most faithful follower, and the only apostle who never abandoned Jesus. Jesus considered him to be like a brother to him, and would even give John his mother to take care of. That's one of the last things he says. One of his last words to his own disciple, that you're my brother now, and this is your mother now. Take care of each other. And yeah, I think John was his most faithful follower of the 12, who believed in him from the start, and would be there from the start and be there at the end. And that's probably why he's considered to be the beloved apostles, because he he never left him, never abandoned him, and believed that who he was from the start. And he'll be even one of the first people to believe that he rose from the dead. Like, he and Peter would be the ones to go to the tombs, were the only ones who listened to Mary Magdalene after they heard that she said that Jesus has risen. And they would it's funny because in John's gospel they say they start running to the tomb, and John had to put in his gospel that he beat him in that race. Like, John had the zoomies that day, but but John's gospel was one to fill out any to fill out anything that the other gospels were missing, to give his perspective, personal perspective, and it was his gospel was for everyone. His gospel was intended for everyone back then, and even now. It's intended for everyone. Like, you can tell that the others had a specific audience, but John's didn't. John knew that the whole world needed to know him. Not just one group of people, but to anyone who wanted to hear. And John would go on to, like I said, he would survive his execution, and he would go on to write Revelations. And John would be probably alongside Peter and Paul, one of the most faithful followers of Christ to ever live, and and would would die uh, would die after writing Revelations, because his gospel and I'll say it, John's my favorite gospel because it, he because his relationship with Jesus was better than anyone else. So, and and he even says it himself that Jesus has done so much in his lifetime that the world does not have enough paper to contain all the things that he's done in Jesus's time. Like, there is so much left out that they could not contain, the pages on any book ever written could not contain the knowledge in which Jesus had done. Like, John said it himself that Jesus that Jesus did all these things. He showed more things that Jesus done and told him that there's even more that we just can't show you because there's so much of it. And I think that's the perfect way to end his gospel, is to say that even though I gave you so much more, there's so much more that I can't even tell you. That Jesus is the one and only Son of God, the one and only Savior of humanity, the one and only Jesus Christ, the Lord and Son of God. If you guys enjoy this video, please subscribe. And if you do subscribe, please share this video with as many people as possible. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Hope you have a blessed day. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video.